What is up, everybody? Welcome to another Saturday morning edition of the College Football Show here on RotoGrinders. Happy to be with you, breaking down another Saturday morning college football slate. We are in the heart of college football season now. Maybe not the most exciting Saturday afternoon slate here, but everyone's playing with the same deck of cards, so still plenty of money to be won out there, and we will try to guide you through that over the next 45 minutes to an hour. And to help you do that, I am Justin Van Zuiden, STL Cardinals 84. I've got the Gridiron Scholar, John Laub, alongside. John, how you doing this Saturday morning?
I'm doing good. Kind of getting excited for that Penn State-Ohio State game, even though I question the fantasy value of the game with possibly two better defenses. But I will say it's interesting, this slate, because we have some G5 teams that I wonder how familiar people are with the players on those teams. So I'm looking forward to see what the rostership is, because we have some non-traditional, but if you love college fantasy football, we're familiar with these programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that kind of gives us an interesting angle to look at today. It's a 12-game slate on DraftKings, which effectively becomes an 11-game slate because you can wipe off Minnesota and Iowa. That game, the total is 30.5, which is the lowest recorded total, assuming it closes there, in college football history. And I laugh because they said on the game day show before we came on, the first half total in the UCF Oklahoma game is higher than the full game total for Minnesota and Iowa. So 12-game slate becomes an 11-game slate unless for some reason you want to play some players from that game. But you probably won't see us talking about too many of them on the show here today. So the biggest injury news today probably comes out of Ohio State. Chip Trayanum was ruled out about an hour or so ago. But Travion Henderson, who was previously expected to be out, has now been upgraded to a game time decision. They could also get Emeka Egbuka back today. So still some moving pieces there with Ohio State that we will have to keep an eye on. That is a 12 o'clock kick. So hopefully we get more clarity on that over the next hour or so. Blake Watson has been banged up for Memphis. That is also a 12 o'clock kick. So we could get some news on him prior to kickoff. Tanner Mordecai is out for Wisconsin with a broken hand. So he won't be playing today or in maybe the rest of the year. Those are kind of the big injuries today. I presume Ohio State is the big one that you're keeping an eye on, but anything else you're looking at here for injuries?
Well, we do have the Mississippi State challenge, right? Will it be Mike Wright at quarterback? He had played at Vanderbilt. He's an elite athlete, dual threat quarterback, more of a runner than a thrower, but in CFF, we definitely like those, throwing quarterbacks. So I'm very interested to see if he's going to get the start today.
I think that was confirmed just a few minutes ago. I will double check.
And then Zach Larrier, the quarterback at Air Force, he wasn't supposed to play all week. And this morning, the coach came out and said he's going to start a quarterback for Air Force. So there was a little value at the quarterback position at Air Force, as of Friday morning. But it seems like that value is gone because Larrier's at 6.7K.
All right. It does seem like Mike Wright is confirmed to get the start for Mississippi State today. So we'll certainly get to him in the value quarterback discussion. We'll keep an eye on the news to see if anything hits for the Buckeyes as that game gets a little bit closer to kickoff in what is the marquee game of the day with Penn State and Ohio State, two undefeated teams taking on matchup in Columbus at 12 o'clock. So all right, let's start with the high-end quarterback plays today. I think, there's two, I guess, in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel at the top. Both of these teams are projected for over 40 points today. Maybe throw Quinn Ewers in that conversation as well, as Texas is projected for just over 40 points. So you got, I'd say, three. And then, Cameron Ward probably on the outside looking in for most people as far as that top range of quarterbacks goes. Do you have a favorite here?
To me, it's by far Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma. When we last saw him against Texas, he looked unbelievably spectacular. I think he's second for the Heisman favorites right now behind Michael Penix of Washington. So I think this is a smash spot against UCF at home. And we in CVS, in DFS, CFB, we're not looking for narratives. But when the narratives match the statistics, Justin, I really like it. And what I mean by that is Dillon Gabriel played his first 3 years at UCF. So we have a little bit of a revenge game narrative here, but all of the statistics, I really like this matchup. Dillon Gabriel's been very good with his legs. I think this might be his best year running the football. Definitely better than last year. You can get massive amounts of yards on the ground against UCF, and they have a rotation of running backs for the Sooners, but we might talk about one who seems like he's rising above the pack there. But I love Dillon Gabriel for at least 4 touchdowns today.
Yeah, I'm fine with Nix and Gabriel. I think Gabriel is probably your cash game play. We have Nix at lower ownership, so don't mind pivoting there in GPPs. But both of them certainly very high projections today. You can see we have them both around 30 fantasy points in terms of our projections. What are you doing with Ewers? Any interest in that Texas passing game today?
Only if I'm looking for GPP. I'm not putting him in cash games because he's too up and down. And I wonder about his ceiling. Have we seen a 30-point ceiling from Ewers? Let me look quickly. 35. So I guess I'm a little bit off. He did have 35 against Kansas. I just don't trust him as much as Gabriel and Nix to get that 30 points.
Yeah, and there he had 2 rushing touchdowns in that game, which isn't, necessarily his mantra. So, yeah, I'm okay with him, but he is a step below those other 2 guys at the top for me. All right, if we move down into the mid-range here, why my filters don't seem to be working. I'll refresh this after we kind of go through some of the names. But you got Jalen Milroe here, who has finally kind of stabilized there as the starter at Alabama. You've got Seth Hennigan, who I think is going to project very well today with Memphis at a 34-point team total. You've got Drew Aller, Donovan Smith, Garrett Green in here in a favorable matchup against Oklahoma State. It seems to me like Hennigan's going to stand out for most people, but who do you like in the mid-range of quarterbacks here?
So I'm going to mention Hennigan, but he's not the one I love the most out of this group. If you haven't seen Memphis or you haven't watched the group of 5 as much as we have here, Hennigan's an outstanding floor player. I think I remember 24 to 29 points each week. He's just unbelievable at producing yards and touchdowns. Love him here. But the play that I like, and I seem to be a little bit alone on this, I like Garrett Green of West Virginia. I think maybe because, West Virginia isn't a great team. Garrett Green is essentially a first-year starter, but he's a dual-threat quarterback. Last week, he had 47 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. The week before, he had 80 yards and another 2 touchdowns. The 44 and 25 DraftKings points. And what I like about it, Justin, we just saw Jason Bean, who was coming off of 2 okay games. Jason Bean and that Kansas program ate apart the Oklahoma State secondary. They're not very good back there. I like Garrett Green because he can actually throw the football. Last week, he had 391 yards passing on top of the 2 rushing touchdowns. He's under 8K. Justin, I'm very fascinated in him. I have him in the majority of my lineups this week.
Yeah, I think there's a really high ceiling there. Of course, their game against Houston last week was wild back and forth. 2 touchdowns in the last 30 seconds of that game. But Green had definitely his best performance of the year. That Oklahoma State defense can be beaten. So even though that game doesn't have the highest total, I think it could be a potential sneaky shootout. So I really like Green today as well. I think he's a strong tournament option for your GPP builds. Definitely my favorite kind of in that range, which is outside of Hennigan, who is the safe choice. Green is probably my favorite in there. And then you start to get down more towards the value range. And I'm not super interested in the next range of guys like KJ Jefferson, Jacob Zeno, Altmaier. I think these guys are okay, but I just don't see really any reason to go here. I mean, the chalk QB2 today by far is going to be Curtis Rourke of Ohio, who is dirt cheap at 5,700. And Ohio is projected for almost 5 touchdowns of offense today. You can see we've got him projected at 51% ownership, largely because there's not a whole lot else to like for value at the quarterback position. So how are you handling this group of under 8K QBs?
The only one, Jacob Zeno's Jacob Zeno
He's
of University of
7,100.
Alabama is interesting, but he's way up and down. We have him projected at 23 points, and we have about 16-point ownership, but I do like other players on UAB, so he's on a very small percentage of my lineups. I agree with Curtis Rourke. He has been frustrating this year, but there are moments. He had 35 points 2 weeks ago against Kent State. And I think this matchup against Western Michigan at home, they're about as bad defensively as Kent State. So if you do want a super flex quarterback to save salary, I like Curtis Rourke there. He is a dual threat running back. So we're getting about, 5, 9, 4 carries a game, 7 carries. So you have some ability there. He hasn't had that 2 rushing touchdown game this year, but he does have that on the resume in the past. So I do find him very interesting. Those would be the only 2 that if you want to, I prefer Rourke, but Zeno is interesting if you want to pivot.
Yeah, if you just want a simple discussion on the Western Michigan defense, they gave up 41 points to Iowa. So that's basically all you need to know about how bad their defense is. Obviously it's a MAC school going against a Big Ten school in that game, but Iowa doesn't put up 41 points in 2 weeks.
Justice, you said you were watching the show. I saw on ESPN they had Iowa's offense last in points, last in first downs, last in every offense. You're like, oh my God, they're so bad.
And somehow they're 6-1. And I mean, if there's ever a case to get rid of divisions in conferences, right? In the Big Ten, you've got Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State all on the same side of the conference. And then on the other side, Iowa is the clear favorite to win the Big Ten West, which is a joke. And then you've got Wisconsin, who just lost their quarterback to a broken hand. And then 5 horrible teams in Northwestern, Minnesota, Nebraska, Purdue, and Illinois. So, I mean, Iowa is going to score 15 points a game. And I mean, their remaining schedule is Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, Illinois, and Nebraska. So, it's Iowa football, and somehow they're going to end the season at 10-2, despite, being just horrific offensively. And I know they lost their quarterback and all that stuff. But in any case, Rourke at 5,700, really, really tough to find an argument against him today outside of, if he gets hurt or something. So, let's see. Anything else at quarterback for you?
I mean, if you want to go bottom of the barrel to kind of change up, Mike Wright is interesting. I believe he had at least one game with 30 fantasy points last year, but he had previously played at Vanderbilt. So he's a very interesting because of his dual threat ability. But that, I think, if you're just trying to differentiate on your lineups, we have him projected at 18 fantasy points. So your price value, your PV per dollar is pretty high, 3.5.
Yeah.
So he is an interesting pivot play there.
If I sort by points per dollar, he is third. Obviously, that ownership will end up being higher. We didn't know until 20 minutes ago that he's going to be starting today. So didn't want to give him the ownership. Depends on who you ask. I mean, if you ask Micah, who does a lot of content for us, he's about as anti-Mike Wright as it gets. He said in our projections channel this morning that we would do people a favor by not projecting Mike Wright at all. So he doesn't like Mike Wright. So it's all in your perspective. I do think if you're looking to get away from the chalk in Rourke, you can sprinkle Wright in some tournament lineups. That's just fine. So, all right, let's go ahead and move to the running back position again, with the caveat that we still really don't know who's going to play and who's not going to play for Ohio State today. So we really don't have any of those guys' projections popping off the page until we get confirmation of who's active. But we've got Braylon Allen, Bucky Irving, Jonathan Brooks, I think have kind of established themselves as three of the more consistent running backs on a weekly basis. They're your top three priced running backs today. They're all projected for over 25 fantasy points. Do you have a favorite out of Allen, Irving, and Brooks today?
I'm going to go with Jonathan Brooks. We have a 41.5 projected total for the offense of Texas. I do believe that Brooks is the MVP of that offense, despite having, Jatavian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, Quinn Ewers. Jonathan Brooks has made that offense really click this year, right? He's been unbelievable for the Longhorns. He had a spectacular game against Oklahoma despite the loss. He had over 30 DraftKings points. In the last three, he's had 30, 40, and 28.4. He's become the main guy. We love Sarkisian's running backs, right? They produce fantasy points over the years. I think this is a great spot today. So I have Brooks in like 80% of my lineups. He's my preferred player, especially against Houston. You just said that Houston, West Virginia game, right? It shot out. What was it, both in the 40s by the double overtime? So, yeah, I don't see how Houston slows down the Longhorns running a game.
Yeah, Houston has allowed 400 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns the last 2 games. And now you got to face Brooks, who has just been on the ascendancy throughout conference play. 4 straight 100-yard games for him. So I am in total agreement there. Brooks is my favorite. I got no issues with Allen and Irving. Obviously, Allen's probably going to get a huge workload with quarterback injury there with Mordecai at Wisconsin. But Brooks definitely my number one today, and certainly the first guy I would plug in if I'm only building one lineup. And then the next range of guys, you're not going to see a ton of ownership. Watson, assuming he's 100%, really good matchup for Memphis today. Ollie Gordon has been, fantastic the last 2 or 3 weeks for Oklahoma State, has clearly taken over that backfield. And then, you've kind of got a mess of guys in the upper 6Ks. Maybe if Henderson's a full go, you got CJ Donaldson, RJ Harvey. Like, I think these guys are interesting for tournaments, but more of a GPP only plays. So is there anybody you really like in that next range?
No, I completely agree with you. They're tournament plays. And I do love Garrett Green and Ollie Gordon as a tournament play, having them shoot back. Because last week, how amazing was that to watch Ollie Gordon get the 100 yards receiving, 100 yards rushing? So you got the 6-point bonus. What a great game he had. I'm not convinced this is as good of a matchup on the road for Gordon, so I don't like him that much in cash games. But, man, in the GPP, if you want to differentiate Gordon and Green and try to find a receiver or something in that, I think it's a very interesting GPP build.
Yeah, I like Gordon and GPP. I love that way you just broke that down. I think that makes complete sense. In terms of some of your GPP lineups today. I think that game, the total's not super high at 48, but both teams, it's got a 2 or 3 point spread. And I could see that game being kind of a sneakier shootout today. So don't be afraid to target some guys. I mean, even Donaldson on the other side of that game is okay. Oh, yeah. If you think UCF can hang with Oklahoma, I think RJ Harvey is a GPP play as well, but certainly guys that aren't going to project as cash game plays because the chalk in this range is definitely going to be Jermaine Brown for UAB. You mentioned liking some other guys for UAB today when we were talking about Zeno, and I presume this would be one of your favorites.
Yeah, the reason why I don't have Zeno on, and I like him, he's an interesting play, but it's hard not to put Jermaine Brown in all your lineups against Memphis here. He's had over 74 DraftKings points the last 2 weeks. He's a pass catcher. He's got 8 receptions in the past 2 weeks. He's their goal line back. He had, home run hitter. He had 5 touchdowns in the past 2 weeks. The Blazers are good. I give Dilfer a little credit. They're at least putting points on the board. Maybe the wins aren't there as much as you'd like to see, but the Blazers are exciting offense. I didn't expect them to be this dynamic. I did like Brown at the beginning of the year, but it's very hard in this matchup against Memphis not to put him in the majority, especially at home. He's at home against the Tigers, so I love Jermaine Brown. That's why the only way, to me, If you're going to take Jermaine Brown out to differentiate, then you can go Zeno. But yeah, if you got Jermaine Brown, it's hard to have both of them.
Yeah, Brown, 5 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He also had 6 catches for 116 yards last week. That's probably a little bit more receiving volume than he's used to getting, but a game that could feature a lot of points here. It is ESPN2 game, so they are on a bigger stage today, and the price is pretty good there, especially without a lot of elite plays kind of in this price range. You could take a shot on the Penn State backfield. You could take a shot on Jace McClellan, but Brown is certainly the guy that's going to stand out in projections today. So that takes us down into the 5K range, where certainly I think there's some, interesting guys as we start to talk value here. You had mentioned maybe taking a look at the Oklahoma backfield. All 3 of their running backs are priced between 5,200 and 5,500. So your thoughts on this 5K range and the Oklahoma backfield?
Whenever you have a 42-point implied total, especially a home team as a big favorite, you got to look at the backfield, right? And I think that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if I'm wrong. Tawee Walker, the running back for Oklahoma, he had over 20 carries last week, and I was doing a little research around, trying to find out a little bit more about him, because I must say he wasn't the one on my radar in the summer. But, man, he's had a couple games with over 20 DraftKings points against Texas. He also had 21 carries and over 20 points against SMU. So you're looking at a player, when he gets the carries, the 2 games he's had double-digit carries, he scored over 20 DraftKings points. The question is, will he get the double-digit carries? He seems to be at the top right now, reading message boards, looking around, trying to do some research. So I do like him if you want to pivot off the Oklahoma passing game, because I think the numbers for UCF against the run, aren't they giving up like over almost 200 yards a game on the ground? They're really, really bad against the run.
Yeah, that's definitely the guy that I prefer. Major would probably be second in that group. But Walker, interesting at 5,400 today for sure. Anybody else in this group that you like? Are you taking a shot on the Air Force backfield? Looks like our projections don't mind maybe Jordan James a little bit. If you think that Oregon can get 2 running backs there today, that's really not a method that I'm using. But anybody else in this range, it's kind of a dead zone.
It is a little bit, but I do have Emmanuel Michel, the fullback on Arizona. Now, it's not great that Larry, or the quarterback, is back in, but Michel, man, when they can't block, when the defense can't stop the inside power game against Air Force, and Navy has a real challenge stopping the inside run game, Air Force is going to bludgeon you with those fullbacks coming up the middle. Now, what you're hoping for is the touchdown equity, and that's always a little bit concerning, right? Because touchdowns can be so fickle. But he's had some games, he had 0 last week. The 3 previous games he combined for 8 touchdowns. The carries are still there, my friend. 22, 18, 33, 28. As long as we get at least 1 touchdown, I like Michel very much.
Yeah, and that game only has a 34-point total, so you're not going to see a ton of offense in that game. Obviously, both teams that game will move fast. Lots of running between those 2 teams, but he's definitely the best offensive fantasy option in that game today. So don't mind that call. And then let's see. I'm going down to the super cheap seats here. Dubinian for Arkansas, we've got at a reasonable projection.
Oh, that's right.
But there's just not a whole lot of value here, because that's why, Rourke at the quarterback position just becomes important. Fagan for Illinois is projecting okay again, but, they're only projected for 18 points. So Buckley for Western Michigan. Is there anybody else you like? I don't really love anyone else here.
No, I don't like the Tennessee backfield against Alabama, even though Tennessee's running the football. I don't think there's necessarily a value there. And then, Jalen Buckley, I think some people might be, did you mention him of Western Michigan? The
Yeah, just
freshman
in passing.
But I mean, he's an interesting player against Ohio. If they can keep running the ball, and I can't go with either of the Iowa running backs, Williams or Johnson. I just can't do it, my friend.
Yeah, I am not going there today either. I just think, don't go probably below 5K with your running back choices today. It's not necessary and just not a ton of elite value down there. So, all right, let's go ahead and move to wide receiver here. Marvin Harrison, again, I think his ownership will end up being a little bit higher than, the minimal number that we have, but it is tough to get to 8,400 for a pass catcher on this slate. Franklin at 8,200 as well. I mean, then there's a big pricing gap until you get down to the next range of guys. So I like Franklin because, Oregon's projected for 40 points. I think especially our projections like him better today. So I'd take Franklin over Harrison at the top, but you don't necessarily need either one of them because of the salary cap being a little tight here. So your thoughts on the high end of wide receiver?
I do agree with you. I prefer Franklin over Harrison. Mostly right now, it's the quarterback position. Plus Penn State, we know their schedule's been, let's just be kind, very weak. So even though the numbers for the Penn State defense look very good, I need to see them against the top flight defense here. So let's see if the defense, but I still believe they're a better defense than what we got with Washington State. Franklin is just peppered with targets constantly, and I believe in Bo Nix more than I believe in Kyle McCord for the Buckeyes. So I do prefer very much Troy Franklin over Marvin Harrison.
Would agree there. If you got the money to spend for a top tier wide receiver, I think Franklin is your guy today. And then I think the next kind of group comes here in the 6Ks. You've got Samuel Brown, Xavier Worthy, Sam Wiglusz, and Jaleel Farouk, all projected around 18 points today. And I think Wiglusz is interesting because, we've got a big ownership projection on Rourke, but not a big ownership projection on Wiglusz. You can certainly pair them up in GPP builds to try to enhance your ceiling with those two guys a little bit today. People are going to love Texas. So in lineups where you're not playing Brooks, Worthy is definitely a great play. Do you have a favorite out of this 6K-ish group?
Well, Wiggles is is definitely, like, to me, the contrarian play, kind of match him up with Rourke because I don't think people are talking about him. And then look at our projection. We have him at around 1%. So you are going to differentiate. He does have 30-point upside. He hasn't done it this year. But if Rourke is going to get on track, Wiggles today in that game, I think he has a great chance of getting over 25 points. And he's not going to be highly owned for what we're projecting right now. I have one player who I like, Jaleel Farouk of Oklahoma. I'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. But Wiggles is, to me, the guy who's very interesting. If you want to differentiate, put Wiggles into your GPP.
All right. I love that call. I wrote that up myself as well this week. So totally agree at the GPP angle there. And then as we go down to, say, the 6K-ish mark, Washington State, I mean, certainly their offense at least deserves something of a mention here. So they're coming off a really surprise blowout loss to Arizona, which was just, completely off the radar and nobody would have projected it. Go back to see if I can find the line on. So yeah, Washington State was favored by 8. They lost 44-6. It's been a while since you've seen a
blown away by that game. Blown away by that, my friend.
Yeah, I can't believe it. They only had 220 yards of offense. And this is a team that's been a pretty prolific passing offense this year. They're going to need to throw today. I mean, they're 20-point underdogs at Oregon. We know they won't be shy about throwing it. So in GPPs, I don't hate throwing Lincoln Victor, who's now healthy again, Josh Kelly, Kyle Williams. I mean, you can throw these guys, especially if you've got a lineup with a Bucky Irving or Bo Nix or Franklin. You want to run it back with somebody from Washington State. I like that thought process in tournaments today. Who else you like kind of in this middle range of wide receivers?
Yeah, and I love for GPP taking one more shot on Cameron Ward. He was so good, Justin, and he's been so bad the last 2 weeks. So I mean, what do we have for own?
Basically nothing.
Yeah, I mean, what a great way. Maybe you do Franklin and the Cougars passing game just for something completely different, and I think is going to be low ownership. Now, in this range, my favorite player, Rock Taylor, the wide receiver out of Memphis. I think he's had 3 straight games now of over 20 points. Yep, and he had 17 and a half the week before against Navy. Now, Memphis has put out outstanding wide receivers and running backs for a real long time. And in the summer, I didn't really know who was going to pop on that Memphis offense. But if you've watched the Tigers this year, Rock Taylor is really good. He's big, he's physical, he's got the upper body. I don't see how UAB can slow him down. He didn't score last week. He hasn't gotten in the end zone a lot. So maybe we get some regression on touchdown equity here from him coming soon. So I love Rock Taylor today. I think I have him in like 80% of my lineups. And Isaiah Williams, he just hangs around. I wonder if the ceiling's coming, right? When are we going to get the 2 or 3 touchdown game? I hope it comes, but he gives you a really nice 14 to 15 point floor.
Yeah, really love that. You get some affordable exposure in that game, which has a 61 point total. He's been playing really well of late, emerging as the clear threat in that passing game. So love that call. He will be a staple of many of my lineups as well. I think he's better than a lot of the other guys in this price range. I think Andrew Armstrong for Arkansas, mainly because he's the clear wide receiver 1 for them. Not that I think, not that their passing game is any great shakes or anything special, but volume related, I think he's fine at 6K. And then I'm going to sort by our ownership here to try to catch some of the other guys that we haven't mentioned yet. So you mentioned Rock Taylor. You've got other passing game weapons, Blankensee projecting just as well in terms of points per dollar. Miles Cross for Ohio. Let's see.
Amari Thomas, a UAB we haven't mentioned.
Yeah, there you go. He's 5,100.
He's 5,100, so he's very affordable. He's been getting paid. He's a freshman, and he has really come on for UAB. I'm having a difficult time. I think I have one lineup with Amari Thomas and with Jermaine Brown. It's kind of hard. It feels weird to bank on 2 Blazers. But I do think Amari Thomas at 5,100 is a very nice value there. And what we have him at 17% projected ownership. So people like him, but I like him too this week. He's a good player.
Yeah, and a reasonable price there again on a week where value is tough. Rashad Owens, I like a good bit for Oklahoma State as well. It's, a little bit of a guessing game with their pass catchers, and obviously Ollie Gordon stole some of the pass catching last week out of the backfield, but Owens is still on a points per dollar basis the best of their wide receiver group at 4,800. I've seen a little love for Will Pauling at 4,400, but I can't really get there with Mordecai being out for Wisconsin. Is there anybody else? I mean, these next few guys are all just kind of risk reward. Jatavian Sanders, maybe you can hope for a touchdown there for Texas, big target in the red zone. But anybody else at wide receiver that we have not mentioned that you want to pass along?
The only other guy I considered would be Cade Stover, the tight end. If Emeka Egbuka is out, Cade Stover has been, you could argue he's been the best tight end in college football this year. He's interesting. I mean, just as a differentiate, what do we have him at ownership? I think he was pretty low. Oh, yeah, we have him at very low ownership. So that's if you want to differentiate. I am interested a little bit in Cade Stover.
All right, I think that takes us through the pass catchers and takes us through the discussion of the DraftKings slate. At this point, we like to take a pause for just a second. We know some of you might have joined us throughout the show, just catching up. Hey, who do we like here or there on DraftKings today? Who are the guys that I have to play? And so we like to pass along John's fantastic 4 picks of the weekend. John, who do you like as your fantastic 4 on DraftKings this week?
All right, if you want to use our optimizer on RotoGrinders, you can put in my fantastic 4 and you can get up to 20 lineup builds. You can do it with GPP or cash game. At quarterback, I love Garrett Green. We love those dual threat running backs. I think this is a sneaky spot. We talked about it earlier in the show. I just think he's being overlooked right now in college fantasy football. I love him at home against Oklahoma State. Jermaine Brown, cash game lock. You might want to differentiate in GPP, but mostly my fantastic 4 is for cash game. I love Jermaine Brown today. I'm going with Jalil Farouk. When I have an offense that is going to probably throw 4 touchdowns, Oklahoma's, I think they're 43.5 points on the board. I love Jalil Farouk today for Oklahoma for the Sooners. And then Rock Taylor. We just mentioned him. He's been really good, everyone. Plug those 4 into our optimizer and see what you get around them.
All right, latest news out of Ohio State, I guess, from an Ohio State staffer on Travion Henderson. The quote was, "We'll find out." So that gives us absolutely no clarity. There was an erroneous report that Chip Trayanum was out earlier. That was just a typo or something incorrect. I think DraftKings even had him marked out as well, but he is good to go, and Mayan Williams is also back. So the Ohio State backfield just kind of feels like a big stay away at this point. And that's basically the clarity that we have gotten so far. So, all right. Love those calls on the Fantastic 4 this week. Of course, if you want to stay up to date on the injury news, thoughts, updates throughout the day, you can check out our college football Discord channel. You do not have to be a premium subscriber to access that. You just have to be a RotoGrinders member. You can sign up for free. And then rotogrinders.com/Discord or follow the links from the site. And there is a college football channel in there that you can stay up to date with the news that we'll try to keep updated throughout the day. All right, so let's go ahead and pivot over for a little bit of FanDuel discussion before we get out of here on this Saturday morning. The night slate tonight is not the most exciting slate of games. We do have South Carolina and Missouri is one of the late afternoon games that is on the FanDuel slate, and then the night games tonight. Again, Utah and USC is probably the headliner matchup, but tough defense for USC to go against. And you got teams like Michigan, Clemson, Miami, good defenses on the night slate. So there's just not a lot of additional plays from the later games on FanDuel today, except for maybe that South Carolina Missouri game I think is interesting in that late afternoon window. So anybody you want to highlight on FanDuel today?
FanDuel is very tight at the quarterback position. First, Jackson Dart is not on the he's not on the DraftKings main slate.
Correct.
But Jackson Dart, Mississippi at Auburn, is a very interesting player here at quarterback. He's only the 4th most expensive quarterback. Now look at the difference in Dylan Gabriel here. He's number 1 on FanDuel. He was the 2nd on DraftKings, but he was far less salary. So that's interesting. Now Brady Cook, I do love him against South Carolina. If my memory serves, I think South Carolina is surrendering over 300 passing yards per game this year, the Gamecocks. And why I like it even more, South Carolina is just good enough, Justin, to put points on the board. So they're going to force Missouri to score also. So I very much like Brady Cook here.
Yeah, I like that game. I think, Cook, definitely an interesting play. Dart, I think, is a decent enough play on FanDuel. Your guy that we talked about on the DraftKings slate, Garrett Green, is only 8,800 on FanDuel.
Oh, yeah.
So I think he makes for a solid, second quarterback option there. 8,800 is pretty cheap for a quarterback with his projection on FanDuel. And I think he's fourth in point per dollar over there on FanDuel. So I like Garrett Green. If we go to running backs, again, we've got Brooks, Irving as the top two guys on this slate. We do have Michigan here if you want to go to Blake Corum. Ole Miss is on this slate, obviously. Clemson, so you got Judkins and Shipley as options. Any thoughts on the running backs here on FanDuel?
Well, the number one for when you take in price and ceiling, I like Quinshon Judkins of Mississippi. If you don't go with Jackson Dart, I like Judkins very much here. And look at this price, Justin. Tahi Walker, who we spoke about on DraftKings, was a value, right? 5.2. He is the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth most expensive running back here for Oklahoma on FanDuel. So we're looking at drastically different pricing. So maybe he's even a better deal than I was willing to give him credit for on the DraftKings slate because he's so expensive right here. And Will Shipley, I'm just disappointed. I see him. He's far down. I don't like the matchup for Clemson versus Miami, and Shipley's been disappointing from a fantasy perspective this year. I don't think I'd go with Shipley on this slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's okay. Nobody that I'm running out. And I do like Jace McClellan, good bet on FanDuel as well. He's only 6,200. So, I mean, that's down with the punt level running backs on FanDuel. So I will play some McClellan over on FanDuel. Ollie Gordon is fine.
Back for, I'm forgetting Utah State. Why did I? Jackson. Why can't I find him on the slate here? Is he that far down?
Here, let me. Yeah, he projects a little better on DraftKings for some reason, but yeah, we've got him projected at 11% ownership.
The only reason we just saw Audric Estime kind of beat up USC. That defense is so bad. I think Jackson's going to get about 22 to 26 carries in this game against the Trojans. So I do like Jackson as a second running back.
That was my worst beat of the year last year.
Too.
I had the under rushing yards on Estime last week, and I also bet USC, but that was an L from the word go because Caleb Williams was so bad. But I had the under rushing yards on Estime. He had, I think it was 93.5, and he had like 85, and USC had the ball down by like 4 scores with 3 minutes to go. They fumbled it away, whatever. Notre Dame gets the ball back. They're up by 24, 28, whatever it was. And Estime's still in there running the football. It's the second time they've done this year. They did it against Navy when it was like 40-0. And then he's in there with a 4-touchdown lead with 2 minutes to go. And he gets 2 carries and he runs for like 12 yards. And then he's up to like 96. I don't understand why they leave him out there to take extra hits in a 4-touchdown game, regardless of whether it hosed me out of some cash or not. That just made it even more frustrating. But I don't get it. Marcus Freeman, I don't like you for leaving Estime in the game. That's neither here nor there, but you mentioned that USC defense and it reminded me. All right, receivers. I mean, you got the same top end guys. I guess the question becomes, do you like Luther Burden better than Franklin on FanDuel?
I absolutely do. I highlighted him this week. This is a bounce back spot. I think his ownership's, we have him at 25% roughly, which might be the most on the board. Is he our most? Nope, he's the second most.
Just behind Farouk.
He's just too good after a down week. I think he had 2 catches this week. I hope that most people, 75% of the people overlook him. But South Carolina, I mentioned it, is so bad on the back end. I love Burden in a bounce back spot here.
Yeah, really strong for him. I think he's my favorite on FanDuel for sure. If you've got the money to spend up. Worthy is pretty cheap on FanDuel at $8K. Owens, who I mentioned I like on DraftKings, I like a lot better on FanDuel, where he's only $6K.
He's cheap here. $6K is really nice value, right?
Yeah, for sure. Given the FanDuel pricing, that's very good. We've got boots on the ground. Let's see, with Watson being a full go for today for Memphis. So pictures of warm-ups. Somebody in the Discord that's at the game sitting in like the front row posting pics of him warming up. So let's see. Apparently shouted out to Watson and he said, yeah, man, I'm 100%. So anyway, boots on the ground. Kudos to that. Get in the Discord.
That's
awesome. Let's see. And somebody asked FanDuel cash, Jonathan Brooks with Owens or Harrison and Shipley. I think we're both on the Brooks Owens train there. I know we don't like Shipley as much.
Absolutely in my book. Absolutely.
All right. So it looks like we bumped up Watson, his projection as well. So you can refresh your lineup HQ and get in there. Let's check the peruse through the YouTube chat here and see if we've got any questions. Somebody wants you to recap your Fantastic Four on DraftKings. So let me pivot back there and I can bring those up. Let's see.
Sure. Garrett Green, quarterback from West Virginia. Love him today. Jermaine Brown, the running back of UAB, smash spot against Memphis. Jaleel Farouk, Oklahoma. I think he's the number one guy there right now, especially with the injury to Antrell. And then Rock Taylor, the Memphis Tigers wide receiver.
All right, that does that recap for that. If you are watching along, you love the live college football show, please hit the thumbs up button on the YouTube feed. We appreciate that. You can subscribe to the channel and get notifications whenever we go live. Of course, Sunday, tomorrow morning for NFL Sunday, we'll have tons of content your way for that. So you can get notifications whenever we go live. Let's see. I don't see anything else that we haven't at least addressed during the show. So with that, probably a good time for us to put a wrap on things for the day so we can finalize our lineups. We wish you all the best of luck with yours as well. Thanks to TJ for working hard producing behind the scenes for us on a Saturday morning. I am Justin. And for John, we hope you all have a great weekend and we will catch you back here next week. Same time, same place. See you later, everybody.